that's the real shit behind building an AK, is knowing how to deal with all the things that could go wrong with that gun, because there's a lot.
So I know who you are, but I know things have changed drastically from when you and I first met, and you know, things are a lot different, right? So so there are a lot of people who don't know who you are, and I'm really good friends with Brandon Herrera. Love him to death, support him in his campaign. Me personally, I consider you the AK Jesus, but hey, it's neither here nor there.
Well,
but for so for those who don't know much about you, just really quickly, give a brief interview about your background and who you are.
I'm Jim Fuller. I had a vast love for the AKs back in the 80s when I first started discovering them, and over the years, I finally got to the point where I could build and work on them because nobody else would back in those days. So, and then we started seeing parts kits roll in. I thought, you know what, maybe we should try to build these things. And so I did. And the first few I built didn't work out well, but I, continued to move on and try to do better. And we managed to get to the point where we could produce a pretty good gun. And in those days, nobody was doing it that much, So I looked around, and there really wasn't much of a, because in 89, when Daddy Bush signed the assault weapons ban, we lost the AK. It was almost non-existent in this country, except for a few oddball imports, Mitchell Arms and all that stuff. But it really wasn't that popular. And all of a sudden I seen an opening. It's like, you know what, maybe we could do something with this gun, because I've loved it all of my life. And, but the only time I didn't use it when I was teaching at Frontside, they wouldn't let you use an AK there because it was an AR-centric place, But that was a long time ago, and I got by that. But shortly after that is when I started actually digging into it. And 2007, I started Rifle Dynamics, and we did quite a lot there. Rifle Dynamics was a great vehicle for bringing the AK to the public, and I think we did a pretty good job of that in regards that raising the popularity, the awareness, how to deal with the gun, how to run the gun, how to work on the gun. These were things that a lot of people didn't know at the time, and we brought it to the forefront. And my Armors video came out, and then I got this weird call one day from this weird guy named Travis Haley, and he says, he goes, "Hey, did you make that gun I seen in this magazine?" Yeah. And I didn't think it was him at first. I thought, what's this M4 guy calling me for, But then it turned out that, the AK was a favorite of his. And that was a big boost. When Haley asked me to build him a gun, I said, yeah, sure, let's do this, see what we can do with it. And I mean, when he released that first video, I think my sales went through the roof. I mean, we were probably about 6 months back ordered at the time. And then within a month, we were about 2 years back ordered. And that's a problem in and of itself. And it's one thing I've tried to avoid these days, which is why I'm very selective about how much work I take in, because you get in so much work and you get overwhelmed. Sometimes you can't get parts to fill those orders. And especially with the AK market, where you're depending on foreign countries to demill guns to get decent parts to build with. Back when I built your gun, I forget what year that was. Was it like 2010, maybe 2011?
Oh man, I think it was probably 2000. Yeah. I'd say about 2000. Yeah. I'd say maybe 2011, 11, 12, maybe.
Yeah, and you had a stock arsenal that we redid and built up into the type of gun that we were building at that time, and it worked out pretty good. I think you like that gun.
I love it. I have it sitting right here next to me. Funny thing, a lot of people don't realize my very first rifle ever was that Arsenal, and so I remember buying it from this local gun shop, and I think they were going for like, what was it, like maybe $700, $800, if that, at the time.
Yeah, yeah. They were cheap.
Yeah. I mean, well, to me at the time, I was like, oh, this is, at that point, the most I bought were, I bought a couple of Glocks, I bought like some Rugers and stuff. So for me, it was like, oh, this is quite a bit. And I remember buying it, and at that point, I'd been hiding a lot of guns from my mom at that point. So I was like, where the hell am I going to hide this thing? And so I was like, I'm just going to hide it under the bed. And so, and then at that point, I got introduced to you. And I can't remember exactly. It might have been by way of Haley. And more than likely, I wouldn't be surprised if that was it. And I remember seeing what you were doing with the AK, because I like the AK. It had a very iconic look and shape to it. But you were the first person I saw making them sexy. And you know, I know. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. We just, you know, I've always been about fighting guns, and the AK is probably the best gun ever made in this world. Well, the only good thing that ever came out of communism, let's put it that way. That's a common phrase these days, but it really is. I mean, it's an incredible gun.
Now, before you finish watching this video, I want to quickly talk about the hearing protection that I'm wearing in this video. These are the AKT1 Blackout wireless in-ear hearing protection with Bluetooth. I like to call them the AirPods for shooters. I say for shooters because AirPods don't protect your hearing, but these do. They are hands down my favorite in-ear hearing protection that I've ever used, and I mean ever. They have an NR 25 dB auto noise blocking. They can enhance your hearing by 6 times. They have advanced noise cancellation, Bluetooth connectivity with high fidelity speakers so you can take phone calls and listen to music. They have a battery life of 10 hours with an additional 30 hours in a charging case, and they're low profile and stylish enough to fit in not only at the gun range, but in your gym, while you're studying, working, at school, at home, you name it. I'm in love with these things, and now they're finally available on my store at shop.mrcolionnoir.com, or you can just click the link in the description section of this video.
The durability, and I mean, sure, here in this country, you know, we're very M4 centric. It's our gun. It's an American gun. It's what we use primarily. But you go out anywhere in the rest of the world, the predominant gun is the Kalashnikov rifle. You know, and it just doesn't take too much to see that. You know, just look at any foreign news footage; it's everywhere. But I was always impressed by it because it was such a great design for that stuff. But yet, it was a 40 design in 47, well, early before that. But it was lacking a lot of stuff. So I really wanted to focus on trying to bring that more into the 20th century. And the rifle you did was like a first example of what we did with trying to change the AK. And we took a lot of flack for it. People hated the gas block that I used. And, you know, I really don't give a because I sold over 10,000 of those things. You know? So the haters can hate all they want, but I built a lot of guns with that gas block, you know. Well, that whole concept of the shortened front end, and now everybody builds a shortened front end, and they talk about how, oh, look what I've done. Yeah, right. I've been there, done that, asshole. You know, I'm sorry. I just, you know, I have to laugh sometimes because I see all these new companies that come out and that they think they're innovating and revolutionizing things, and they're just rehashing stuff that's been done the last 10 years. You know, but now, you know, the industry has grown to such a point that, you know, I have a philosophy. There's basically 3 classes of products on the gun market. And this applies to anything, really, not just the gun market, but there's new and innovative stuff. There's more of the same, and there's stuff that's just meant to separate you from your money, you know? And as we've gone on, early on, there was a lot of purposeful stuff coming out from a lot of different guys. But now we just got all the guys jumping on, cashing into it, making anything they can that looks good on Instagram and selling it as the latest, greatest thing, when it doesn't really do anything for you but take your money.
Yeah, I think for me, because of the era that I came up in the gun space, like I always like I'm like a early millennial, right? And so for me, I felt like I lived in the greatest generations because I lived in a time where there was no computer, no social media. Up until now, it completely dominates everything, right? So I can flip back and forth in between those different eras. At the same time, I feel like I did the same in terms of the gun community, right? The gun, before I got into it, it had been well established way before I got into it. But so I was able to piggyback off of all the knowledge that had been acquired and accumulated over that time period, and then bring it to the forefront from my perspective onto the social media online platform. I don't mean I did that solely, but you know, from whatever angle and area that I did it in.
Sure.
And so at that time, you know, for me, I know what purpose-built stuff is. I know what stuff is designed to actually work, how it's supposed to function, so forth and so on. And I also know the stuff that is more so kind of flash. For me, I've always, and I got a lot of flack for it when I came into it. I've been unapologetic about the fact that I like flash. Give me flash as long as it doesn't not work. If you want to give me some flash on top of something that doesn't not work, I'm all for it. At the same time, there is something to be said about the fact that flash with no substance is a totally different ball game. And I try to do my best whenever I do videos, for instance, about certain firearms to delineate, look, I like this thing because I like the way it looks. It's fancy, it's pretty, it does a job, and so forth and so on. But this is why I like it. And then also when there's guns that I'm like, no, this is a gun, this is hard use, this is what I would use it for. I try my best to do that. I don't always succeed, but I try.
No, you do a good job of it. You know, you really do. I've watched your stuff for years, and you know, it's hard for people to call you a shill because you do it well. You know, and that's you know, well, whenever you're in the game you're in, you know that you take that risk of being called a shill. Oh, well, yeah, they're paying him to support that. It's like, you know what? Everybody fucking does it. So what difference does it make? You know,
no, the funny thing about it is,
you know,
I don't have the weird thing is, you know, what makes me really dishonest as a person who is so-called influencer or reviewer or whatever. What's dishonest is when I have products that I genuinely, really, I mean, absolutely am in love with, and I tone it down because I'm afraid people are going to think I'm only saying that because they gave me the gun or I'm working with this company, so forth and so on. Right. That is actually when I'm generally being dishonest, because I've had it before where I've genuinely loved the gun and I've communicated that, and all I got was, oh, you're just saying that because this and that. I'm like, so now I find myself sometimes toning down how much I love a certain gun just to avoid seeming that way, which recently I've had a come to Jesus moment with myself, and it's like, I don't give a fuck anymore. If I like the gun, I'm going to say I like the gun. I'm going to tell you exactly how much I like it.
I get that, man, because I've come the same way. You know, I mean, I'm pretty outspoken, and I don't hold back on things, you know, because I was raised at a time when realism meant things. You know, you talked about the generational thing. I'm further back than you, obviously. You know, I'm kind of like, you called yourself an early millennial. I'm like a late boomer. You know, yeah. it's funny, you know, 'cause I'm not your typical boomer, I don't think, or in the sense that people use that term. But it's just funny how we're perceived in the industry like that. And, you know, because you and I both are pretty well known for what we do. And people want to make it, people are always wanting to make it something it isn't sometimes, you know, and I find it very entertaining. And like you just said, I've gotten to the point where I really don't give a shit anymore. You know, I mean, I've had people attack me just to draw attention to themselves, you know, and you know that they do it to you too. And sometimes I just get to the point where I got to laugh at it. It's like, okay, dude, we got another one. All right. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Whatever, you know. Now, anyhow, like you said, getting back to the whole progression of things, you know, I mean, after RD, I thought I was really kind of done. You know, I was really looking at retirement. I mean, I'm in my 60s, you know, and I thought maybe you just slow down and go live a clean, happy life and forget about all this stuff. But I forgot about one thing, and that's when you retire, if you don't have something to do, you will die of boredom. You know, I watched all of my relatives. I'm the senior in my family now. When my seniors, you know, my aunts, uncles, people like that had grown up with for all my years, and they retired, and they didn't have anything to do, and most of them got ill and died very fast because they weren't busy. They thought, oh, I'm just kicking back. Well, a lot of them started drinking and getting fat and overweight and bad health, and they went downhill fast. I'm not going to do that. You know, one of my mentors, a man named Billy Stojak, he was been a manufacturer since 1962. Amazing man. I learned so much from that guy. He used to come to my shop on the weekends to sit around and build odd projects. He'd bring over a ring from the fucking mortar. He says, look, we got to weld this back up. I need your help. You know, but it was cool stuff. But, you know, Billy told me, he says, you know, Jim, if you retire, because he was a retired firefighter and he was busy all the time. And he says, you can't retire. He says, if you retire, you die. You know, and he says, I will die at my workbench. And he did. He had a massive heart attack at his workbench working on something that he loved. And I want to go out the same way. You know, that man affected my life a lot growing up or coming up through this industry. And I really appreciate how he went out, and I want to go out the same way. Because it's just, that's what he did. That's everything he stood for. And he believed in what he did. And what he did was, he did quite a few cool things. You know, a lot of people don't know, but he did.
I respect that immensely, and it's funny you bring that up because, you know, me being where I'm at now, I find myself flirting with burnout quite frequently, and sometimes I end up telling myself, you know, I just want to get to a place where I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I just want to back away and just do nothing and just have this life of just ease, right? Because I don't remember the last time I took a vacation. I don't. And recently, I thought to myself, what would you do if you had all the free time in the world to do whatever it is that you want? And I was like, you fucking get it, you're doing it. So,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know what I mean? Like, so, you know, it's going to involve cars. It's going to involve guns. Like, at the end of the day, that's pretty much what it is.
That's life, man. That's life.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you in that regard. I do want to ask you about something AK specific, for instance. What are your thoughts on, so like, there is that crowd, right, in the gun space that are very adamant. They're either very M4 driven or they're very AK driven. I'm kind of tactically fluid. I go back and forth between, you know, the AR side, the AK side. Even when I think about, okay, what's going to be my go-to gun, right? I find my mind subconsciously thinking, well, maybe it should be something like an AK platform or something like that. It's just dumb, stupid, and simple and works, right? Yeah. What are your thoughts on, for instance, guns like, the Mini or the Micro Dracos?
Oh, they're fun. You know, they're neat little gadgets to play with. But you know, I classify that as kind of a novelty more than anything. Those guns, you know, anytime you take a 7.62 gun and you shorten the barrel down to 8 inches, I think actually 10-inch barrels. I can't remember. If 10 inches, you're okay, but you're really sacrificing a lot of velocity in that round. You know, the 7.62 round is famous for being able to shoot through things and do things like that. But when you shoot it out of an 8-inch barrel, even a 10-inch barrel, which is better, but 8-inch barrel it's anemic, man. It's barely more than a 1911 at that point. You know, it's do a chrono test on it sometime. You'll see. You know. So, but as a cool gun even for a short range gunfight in a phone booth or something like that, it might be fine, you know. But again, it's kind of novelty stuff. It's cool, and for people, if they buy it and they like it and they go out and enjoy it, more power to them. Enjoy that gun and have fun with it, because that's really what it comes down to. I've said this many times, and I want to say it again because you know. There's guns from, you know, like the cheaper Dracos all the way up to more expensive stuff that I make or some of the other manufacturers make. But the thing is, everybody has a right to have one. And your financial conditions should not dictate what gun you have. Unfortunately, in a capitalist society, it does. But the thing is, if that's the only gun you can afford, buy the best gun you can, shoot it as much as you can, and make sure that gun is going to work for you. And if it does, you're good. If it doesn't, well, then seek other things. But the Draco, it's still made on Romanian parts, which are durable. It's going to last. It's going to work. Is it as good as a full-length AK or even a mid-length AK? I would say no. But that's just me and my snob appeal and what I know. You know,
No, I get it. For me, I'm like, I love the form factor. You know, I live in the city. So everything, I always want everything smaller, right? So I have, you know, the ability to move around.
I just built a Scorpion because I love that shit too.
Exactly, right? I've even gone to the point now where I'm like, maybe a PCC is probably the best type of home defense setup to have. There's a lot of arguments to be made there.
There is a lot of arguments for that. Myself personally, I use an AK-105 at home or my URD in 5.45, and I use Russian ammo because that stuff is the most effective stuff I've ever seen for home defense. It stops on the first thing it hits, and it loses all of its energy right there. So I find it to be very devastating to whatever it hits, but it doesn't go much further than that. We've tested it through wall built, sample wall bills with 1-inch stucco on the outside, drywall, blah, 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 insulation. You shoot 7 and 6 straight through that, and when it comes out of the other side of the wall, it's pretty weak at that point. But what it hits hard. So
you're talking about the 5.45? You're talking about the 5.45 round in general, or are you just talking about?
Well, the 7 and 6 in particular, the Russian surplus ammo. Same thing with the Hornady tap round that they make. It's pretty decent too. That ammo is pretty devastating for close range urban use. Now the 7.62, it's a pretty good round for penetrating thing. And if you're shooting it out of full length barrel, there's a chance that it could leave your house, and we don't want that. You know, if you're in an urban environment, these are things you have to think about, and that's one of the arguments for the pistol caliber carbine, because it's a round that's going to be effective, but it's not a round that's going to over penetrate and go off and hit neighbors three houses down. You know. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration when you're thinking about that kind of stuff, and that's just some of them right there. What works for me may not be the right thing for somebody else. You know, now if I was living in a rural area, the 5.45 might not be my best choice. I might consider 7.62, just because it works good for shooting through things, and you know, you got a little bit more distance, whatever. it's all situational. You know that we've discussed this stuff for years, and that's it's an individual thing. How do you live? Where do you live? What kind of risks do you go through? That's how you really need to apply what weapons you choose, whether it's a knife, pepper spray, any of the the escalating things that you can use for that stuff. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a gun. You know that we're talking about self-defense. We're not talking about just shooting people.
I think definitely here in America we tend to be, and I'm guilty of this by the infinite degree of being a little myopic when it comes to self-defense, where everything just focuses and centers around the firearm, when in reality it's a part of a tool that's part of a larger strategy to make sure we don't die.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm guilty of that because the sexiest part of it is the gun, right? I mean, there are some knife people.
Of course.
Yeah. But knives still freak me out. I know that's weird to say considering I'm a gun guy, but I have this weird thing about knives. I tell people this all the time, and it's irrational. It's completely irrational. Like somebody pulls out a gun versus somebody pulling out a knife. Yeah, you pull out a knife, I'm kind of like, oh shit. I don't know why. I still don't understand it.
I'd rather be shot than cut, to be honest with you. I'd rather be shot than somebody who knows than be cut by somebody that knows how to use a knife, because you're not going to fucking survive. You're going to bleed out faster than you're going to ever get in the ambulance. Or with a gunshot, you might survive. So,
and I think subconsciously that's why I'm kind of like, ooh, when it comes to knives. and I've stabbed myself a couple of times here and there, doing stupid shit with knives. But it is what it is.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're talking about the progression. We keep folding in and out of this topic, but these days we're at Fuller Phoenix now. I'm down in the Scottsdale area, and people think the Phoenix has to do with the fact that I'm in Arizona now, but it really doesn't. The Phoenix has to do with a lot of the mindset that I went through after RD, and it's kind of like after something like that, I really kind of had to crash and re-examine what I really wanted to do and what I wanted to step into as we moved on. And then Travis opened that door for me, and he says, look, let's work together and try to develop something. And we've been working on that for 3 years now. And there's been good things, there's been bad things. We've had some successes and we've had some setbacks, but we're still working on it. Weapons development on this level is something I never have experienced before. And I'm fortunate to be working with Haley on it because he has. He went through the whole Masada thing and back in his Magpul days. And so his advice has been very helpful along those lines. And we're getting to the point where, over the last 3 years, I thought we were there, but understand one thing, we don't use our customers as test dummies. We shoot the shit out of these guns. I thought maybe about a year ago it was ready to go, and we had 15,000 rounds through a machine gun that had been working pretty good. And then about 1,000 rounds later, it decided to take a shit, or it did something I didn't like. So we stepped back and say, okay, this didn't work out. So how do we learn from it? And that's what we've been doing the last year, is redeveloping some of that stuff. And I really, really honestly hope that we can get it out this year. But this is an effort I've never tried to do before. And it's daunting. It really is. I never had any idea what it would be like to develop something like this in the way that we're doing it. And it's exciting. And it is my swan song, so I'm not going to let it out until I know it's 100% fact, because I'm not going to have all that crap floating around on the internet. That I've seen so many good companies that did a good start. They had a good thing out, but they missed one little thing that they didn't test properly. And then that one little thing would destroy their whole project, even though that one little thing was really kind of meaningless. But it would, I've seen it happen with a couple of different companies who had really good start, really good ideas going out, but they just missed one little thing. And as soon as it hits that market, the internet tears them apart over an extractor or some stupid bullshit like that, after they've spent years and over $1 million developing everything else. But one little tiny thing like that will kill your whole process. And I'm not going to allow that to happen to what we're doing. It's not going to go out until I've seen 20,000 rounds go through it without any fucking problems, because 20,000 rounds through a machine gun prototype, if it don't break, it ain't going to break on the average person with a semi-auto. That's just my philosophy and how we do stuff. So I don't want to put anything out that's going to put us in that light. I'm not going to do it, especially for my swan song gun. This is the last gun I'm probably ever going to do. And it's going to be better than anything I've done before, and it's going to open a lot of eyes to what can be done with this gun. So that's kind of where we're at on that. You know.
Speaking of which, you know, for the, you know, there's a lot of I'm gonna say folklore, but you know, there's the idea and the impression that, you know, AKs they're perfect. They're indestructible. They work fine.
Man, they got their problems.
Gotcha. And so, like, if you can just kind of touch on some of the negative aspects or some of the limitations of AKs that most people aren't necessarily aware of, generally speaking.
Well, the biggest thing is probably the spec, because the specs are all over the place. There is not one standard spec like we do here. You know, I mean, for instance, the trunnion opening for the barrel to go into, there's 4 different sizes out of Russia. You know, I mean, you'd think it'd only be one size, but it's not. You know, you can buy a Russian kit and a brand new barrel, and it'll shove right in there if there's no press fit. It happens sometimes, and you got to buy an oversized barrel. So you run into that all the time with these parts, particularly these days when people can't buy complete parts kits that much anymore. Most of the really nice ones are gone well over $1,000 now to be able to get something like that. And a lot of people can't afford that. So they end up piecing together parts kits from parts from all these different countries. And you got a gun that even in the Russians, it's out of spec amongst its parts, but now you've added them from all these different countries. And now you got a real problem trying to make all that stuff work together. And that's the real shit behind building an AK, is knowing how to deal with all the things that could go wrong with that gun, because there's a lot. You got to remember that gun was built under communism when labor didn't matter. Labor was cost them pennies, if anything, if even that, you know. So, and the gun is a very laborious gun to build properly. And I'm going to add that it's such a brilliant design, it can be built horribly wrong and still work. And that's the downside of this gun, because people jump into the industry and they go, I'm going to slap this thing together and it's going to make a bunch of money. And then the poor guy that bought the gun, you know, 5,000 rounds on the road, the shit's falling off, but things are shaking apart. It's getting loose. And, you know, it's unfortunate, because people, just because they can make a shoot, they think it's done, and it's not. There's a lot to these things. You know, we'll shoot 100 rounds through a customer's gun, just testing different things, sometimes more, just to make sure that that gun is going to do what it's supposed to do. And we've finally gotten to the point now where we just don't take in anything unless we're just not going to take in anything anymore. It's going to have to be good quality parts kits, or we're just not going to do it, because I can't promise the customer the best gun that they hope for if they're sending me parts that are worn out and mismatched. You know, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to put my name on that. So it's just a matter, of how we look at things and how we want things to be. And, this is life-saving stuff for us. This is, you know, we're not, I have a small niche in this market, and that's all I really care about. And those are people that fight for their lives. And this is a tool that they use for that. So my philosophy will always remain in that mindset that I can't cut corners anywhere. And the fact is, if somebody's counting on this to defend their life and it fails, I'll stick a gun in my head, because I can't fucking stand that idea. That would destroy me. And a lot of people don't care about that stuff. You know, I'll see a product that come out and says, you know, must be installed by gunsmith, or we won't honor anything. And it's just some fucking screw-on device. Well, why are you worried about that? Why do you have to put this disclaimer on there? You know, because they didn't do their homework and find out if it'll work or not. And that's a lot of what this stuff is these days. So, you know, that's just kind of a general overview of why this gun is so difficult. And anybody who's spent time building these, who knows that what I'm saying is true. If they don't, they haven't built that many guns, because it's just something you find out. I mean, I don't know. I've built thousands of guns over the years, and a lot of people have built 3 or 4, and they think they're an expert. So when you get up to about 200 or 300, let's have another discussion to see how much of an expert you really were. You know, I'm just being honest, man. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just being honest. You know.
No, I mean, honestly, if there's a gun that intimidates me from a building standpoint, it's definitely the AK platform.
It's not like the Eastern technology behind it. It's sheet metal. Can you think of any sheet metal guns that we've ever made for our military? There is one. The grease gun in World War II.
Gotcha.
That's the only stamped gun that our military has ever fielded. We've always had things milled out of steel, aluminum, this kind of stuff. It's just a difference in mindset, Eastern and Western technology. If you look at the Russians and the Germans and the Eastern Bloc people, they were using pistol caliber carbines with sheet metal long before we were. You know, we copied them basically with the grease gun. It's like, oh, we can sheet metal, we can slap this together real quick, and we can get guns out on the field doing the work. And that's what brought the grease gun thing. But they had so much experience building pistol caliber carbines, the PPSH, the all the different things that the Russians built, all the different things that Germans built. And so they decided that they could carry that on into bigger things. And then they went to the medium power cartridge when they decided to do the AK. And if you look at if you study the history of the AK, the original AK-47, there's 3 different types. There's a Type 1, a Type 2, and a Type 3. The Type 1 was a stamped receiver gun, and it failed. They replaced it with a build receiver gun after 2 years, the Type 2, because the Type 1, their stamped receiver technology was not there for that medium power cartridge. They were having a lot of problems with it because it wasn't a pistol caliber. It's now a much more powerful round, not a full-size rifle round, but still more powerful than a pistol round. So they had to reassess things. And so the period of the AK-47 from Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 that went from 47 to 59, the Type 1 only shared 2 years of that. Then the Type 2 came out, and the Type 3 was a simplified version of the Type 2, which was easier for them to produce. And then in 1959, 60, somewhere around there is when they switched over to the AKM and went back to stamped sheet metal and at that point they had it down. That's the format that just about all AKs have been built off of since. The biggest change after that was the 74 when they changed the caliber and did some lightning cuts and some redesign there. But still, the gun works pretty much the same way it always has. And that center section of the AK, that is the magic of that gun. Everything else around it you can do stuff with. But that center section, man, that's the magic. Those parts that are in there and that design, that's the shit that gives you life.
Gotcha. So one last question I want to ask you, because one of my favorite rounds is the 300 Blackout. And I know a lot of people have likened 300 Blackout to the American version of a 7.62 by 39, essentially. So this is kind of a troll question, but what are your thoughts about the 300 Blackout compared to the 7.62 by 39?
It's really hard to make it work in an AK platform. I just built two 300 Blackouts for Sebastian Gorka. The first one was a small Galil pistol, and man, that took a lot of work to get that thing to run. And then I just did. He wanted a full length 14.5 cut down gun that we just finished, and I haven't even delivered that one yet. But it's a lot of work to get that gun to run well with a 300 Blackout because it's in the AK platform because it's designed to be gassed much different. When you have a long barrel, you've probably seen it like a lot of guys are doing now is they're buying an AR gas block and setting it up way back on the barrel and running a gas tube forward to the gas block so they can get longer dwell time to be able to run the 300 Blackout better. And that's a successful way to do it. But people are experimenting with different things like that, and it works. But there's, it's a round the gun was not designed around that round. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to working well with it. However, you can make it work. It's just not the best round for that platform, in my opinion. I think that you can probably get a 7.62 39 subsonic to do just about the same thing. But then again, when you start dropping down the pressures of the case of the round itself to get it quieter like that, you're going to interfere with how the gun operates, the springs, the gas pressure, all that stuff. It's a big difference when you do that. And then if you're adding a can on top of it, now you got the gas back pressure. And, well, I want to be able to shoot it without a can. Well, then why'd you buy 300 Black?
No, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I like the idea of running supers without a can, and the only reason is because I can get the gun in such a small form factor while still getting close to what an 18-inch, not an 18-inch, what like a 10-inch barreled 5.56 would do. And so that's why I like Blackout. And as far as subs, I mean, it's a glory. I mean, you're talking about a 45 with more coefficients, but I mean, it's essentially kind of what it is. But it's so cool because it's so quiet. But and you can pretty much get the same level of sound with a 45. But that's kind of why I kind of love the 300 Blackout in that regard because you have that versatility.
Oh, it is, man. It really is.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts about 7.62 by 39 being shot at? Like, there's a lot of companies now that are creating these platforms that are kind of more AR centric, but then they're shooting the 7.62 by 39.
Well, there's been a lot. I call those. I think one company actually calls theirs the Mutant. I forget what the name of that company is, but they have
Seaman G.
Yeah, CMMG, that's right. I think it's really more of an AR that's just been chambered for the AK. But there's been a lot of attempts over the years to kind of meld the both of them together. And excuse me, and that's a difficult thing to do because the designs are so different and the way they work is so different. I don't think anybody's really been 100% successful with that. Probably the best working version I ever seen of an AR in 7.62 was probably the one that Knights put out that never was produced. That thing actually worked pretty well from what I understand. They just never produced it. But it was a kind of a mutant, same type of thing. And honestly, what we're working on may be even considered the same type of thing because our first gun is going to be chambered in 7.62, but it's going to have a lot. It's not going to be a total AK. It's going to be a little bit different too. And we'll see how people react to that when it comes out. But, you know, we're not going to put out anything we know isn't valid. So kind of where I'm at on that one. Yeah.
But no, Jim, I mean, I really appreciate it, man. It's been so long since we last spoke. And so I remember I came across one of your posts on Instagram. I'm like, man, I got to get Jim. I got to get him on the podcast.
Well, honored to be here, man. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. You're a smart guy. You know the industry, and you know the stuff we go through, man. It's
to say the least. But I mean, you're always welcome to come back on here. You know, I love speaking with you. So either way, whether you come back on or you don't, you know, I always love you. Thank you for taking care of my baby when I first got her. Like I said, like that gun, I'm looking down because I'm looking at it right now. It's always going to hold a special place in my heart. I'll never get rid of it.
Well, we appreciate that. And I was glad we were able to do that for you. And maybe we can get you into something new when we get our new stuff ready.
Truth be told, I need to build a 545. I do not own any platforms that shoot 545. So that's kind of a disgrace.
Well, that's kind of an issue now because the parts are so hard to get, decent parts anyhow. And of course the ammo's gotten really expensive too. So the popularity of 545 is really starting to die off now. Now, if the ammo comes back, I think it will come back again if we get the ammo back at a reasonable price. But right now, it's become more affordable to shoot 5.56, and the 5.56 AK, which everybody said for years, oh, that's blasphemy. You can't do that. Now everybody wants one. Funny how money will drive that, huh?
Well, hey, that's usually how it goes, man. That's usually how it goes. But, yeah.
Indeed. Well, yeah, I appreciate you, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you again, as usual. And we'll do this again. I love your work, man. I love what you do. And hey, maybe you should be the president of the NRA now.
Relax, Jim. Relax.
You know I had to do that. You know I had to say that because everybody else on the internet's saying it too.
Man. I deal with enough stress already, and I'll say this much without getting into the weeds of the details. I've seen what a president of the NRA has to deal with, notwithstanding whatever controversies that are going on. And it's a lot, man. It's a lot. And
I have no doubt. I wouldn't want to take on that job. No way, But I'm really glad to see that they're making some changes now and things may be going for the better where we need it.
Yeah. But like I said, I tell people all the time, whether it's with the organization or not with the organization, me doing my own thing, I'm going to keep running my mouth until I can't. So.
Bless you for that.
Absolutely. But no, thank you, Jim, man. I really appreciate it. Look forward to having you back on pretty soon, man.
Anytime, brother. Just give me a call.
Absolutely.
Guns aren't political. That's why I need your help getting this message to spread on YouTube by clicking the thumbs up button, leaving a comment to let me know what you think of the video, then subscribing to the channel. But most importantly, click that bell symbol. For products featured in this video, click the links in the description.